The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear. But it was the doctor's smile that stopped my heart. I'd spent 25 years hiding who I was, binding my chest, dodging mirrors, and lying to everyone, especially myself. But in that sterile moment, with my secret laid bare, Dr. Ethan Caldwell's warm grin cracked open a world I'd never dared imagine. My name is Riley Parker, and I grew up in a small Ohio town where being different wasn't just frowned upon, it was dangerous. By 16, I knew I was trans, but the word felt like a grenade I could never throw. My parents were good people, church-going and kind, but their love came with expectations I could never meet. So I ran. At 18, I packed a bag, caught a bus to New York City, and built a life as a man. No questions asked. I worked odd jobs, kept my head down, and avoided doctors like the plague, until the pain in my side became a fire I couldn't ignore. The emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights and hurried voices. I'd collapsed at my bartending job, clutching my abdomen, and my coworker Mia had driven me to street. Luke's hospital. Appendicitis, the nurse muttered, ushering me into a curtained bay. I was terrified not of surgery, but of the truth. I hadn't transitioned medically. My body still betrayed me in ways I couldn't hide. When Dr. Caldwell walked in, his presence filled the room like sunlight breaking through a storm. He was tall, with dark hair curling at the edges and eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Riley. Right, he said, glancing at my chart. His voice was calm, steady, like he could anchor me through the panic spiraling in my chest. Let's figure out what's going on. I nodded, my throat tight. The exam started. Routine pulse, temperature, questions about the pain. Then came the moment I dreaded. I need you to lift your shirt and lower your pants, he said, his tone professional but kind. My hands shook as I complied, revealing the binder that flattened my chest and the truth below. I braced for judgment, for disgust, for the rejection I'd spent my life dodging. Instead, Dr. Caldwell smiled. Not a smirk, not pity, just a warm, human smile that made my breath catch. Looks like you'll need a full exam, he said, his voice gentle but with a spark of something I couldn't place. Don't worry, Riley. I've got you. Those words echoed in my head as he continued the exam, his hands steady and respectful. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He asked about my medical history, my pronouns, my life, all with a quiet curiosity that felt like a lifeline. When he confirmed appendicitis, he explained the surgery with a clarity that eased my fear. But it was his presence, his unshakable acceptance that undid me. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a secret to be hidden, but as a person worth knowing. The surgery went smoothly, and I woke up groggy but alive in a recovery room. Ethan Dr. Caldwell checked on me later. His white coat swapped for a navy sweater that made him look less like a doctor and more like someone I wanted to know. You're doing great, he said, sitting by my bed. But I'd like to see you again. You know, to make sure you're healing. His eyes held mine, and I swear my heart forgot how to beat. Was he flirting? I couldn't tell. I'd spent so long guarding myself that I didn't know how to read kindness, let alone attraction. But when he handed me his card with a handwritten note, call me Riley. For medical or other reasons, I felt a spark I hadn't known I could feel. Days later, I was back in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, staring at that card. Mia, my only real friend in the city, caught me fidgeting with it over coffee. Dude, call him, she urged, her eyes sparkling with mischief. He's hot. He's a doctor. And he didn't bat an eye at your truth. That's like unicorn-level rare. I laughed, but my stomach twisted. I'd spent years avoiding connection, terrified that anyone who got close would reject me once they knew. Ethan already knew, and he hadn't run. Still, doubt gnawed at me. What if he was just being nice? What if I was reading this wrong? I called him. My voice shook as I left a voicemail. But an hour later, my phone buzzed with a text, "Dinner tomorrow. There's a great spot in the village." I stared at the message until my screen went dark, my heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. The restaurant was small, with fairy lights strung across the ceiling and a warmth that felt like a hug. Ethan was already there, wearing a green button-down that made his eyes look like a forest I could get lost in. "You look good," he said, standing to greet me. His smile was the same one from the hospital warm. Disarming. Dangerous. We talked for hours. He told me about growing up in Boston, his love for jazz, and how he became a doctor to make a difference. I told him about Ohio, my art, and the walls I'd built to survive. When I admitted I was trans, my voice barely above a whisper, he reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said. "It doesn't change how I see you." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But fear is a stubborn thing, and mine had roots deep enough to choke. As we walked through Washington Square Park after dinner, the city alive around us, he stopped under an archway. "Riley," he said, his voice low, "I like you. Not just as a patient or a friend. I want to know you, all of you." My breath caught. I'd spent so long hiding, so long believing love was for other people. But standing there, with Ethan's hand warm against mine, I felt a crack in the walls I'd built. Maybe, just maybe, I could let someone in. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of late-night texts and stolen moments. Ethan and I met for coffee, for walks along the Hudson, for quiet evenings where we'd talk until the city fell silent. Each moment with him chipped away at my fear, but doubt lingered like a shadow. I'd catch myself wondering if this was real, if someone like him, successful, confident, kind, could truly want someone like me, with all my baggage and secrets. One night, at his apartment in Chelsea, we sat on his couch, a jazz record spinning softly in the background. The room smelled of cedar and coffee, and his hand rested on my knee, warm and steady. "Riley," he said, his voice soft but serious, "I need you to know I'm all in. But I can feel you holding back. What's scaring you?" I froze. I wanted to tell him everything, how I'd spent years feeling like a fraud, how every step toward authenticity felt like a step toward danger. But words failed me. Instead, I leaned in and kissed him, tentative at first, then desperate, like I could pour all my unspoken fears into that moment. He kissed me back, his hands gentle but firm, grounding me in a way I hadn't known I needed. When we pulled apart, his eyes searched mine. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, "but you've got to let me in." I nodded, my throat tight. That night, I told him about the bullying in Ohio, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, the way I'd learned to hide to survive. He listened, his hand never leaving mine. And when I finished, he pulled me close. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. "You've got me." But the world wasn't as kind as Ethan. A week later, I got a call from my old high school friend, Jake, who'd tracked me down through social media. He was in New York for work and wanted to catch up. I hesitated. Jake knew me as Rachel, the name I'd buried long ago. But he'd always been kind. So I agreed to meet him at a diner in Midtown. The moment I saw him, I knew it was a mistake. His eyes widened as he took in my short hair, my flat chest, the man I'd become. "Rachel," he said, his voice laced with confusion. I corrected him, "It's Riley now," but his questions came fast, sharp, like accusations. "What happened to you? Why didn't you tell anyone? Are you Okay. I tried to explain, but his words grew colder. His tone edged with something like betrayal. You're not the person I knew, he said, standing to leave. I don't get this. I don't think I can. His rejection stung, reopening wounds I thought had healed. I walked home in a daze, the city's noise drowning out my thoughts. When I told Ethan about it later, his face darkened. Jake's loss, he said, pulling me into a hug. You don't need people who can't see you for who you are. But Jake's words lingered, feeding my doubts. What if Ethan woke up one day and felt the same? What if I was too much too complicated? Too broken? I started pulling back, canceling plans, dodging his calls. Ethan noticed. Of course. He always noticed. One evening, he showed up at my apartment unannounced, his face a mix of worry and determination. Riley, talk to me, he said, stepping inside. You're shutting me out, and I don't know why. I wanted to lie, to say I was fine, but the truth spilled out instead. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice breaking. I'm scared you'll wake up and realize I'm not worth it. That physmized too much. Ethan's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. You think you're too much. Riley, you're everything. You're brave and kind and so damn real. I'm not Jake. I'm not going anywhere. His words were a lifeline, but fear is a stubborn beast. I wanted to believe him, but part of me still braced for the day he'd change his mind. As he pulled me close, I let myself sink into his warmth, praying I could find the courage to trust him. The turning point came in the spring, when Ethan invited me to a fundraiser at the hospital. It was a glitzy event, all tuxedos and champagne, meant to raise money for trans healthcare programs. I hesitated. Crowds made me nervous, and the idea of being around Ethan's colleagues felt like walking into a spotlight. But his excitement was infectious, and I couldn't say no. I wore a suit, my binder snug beneath my shirt, and Ethan's smile when he saw me made my heart skip. You look incredible, he said, his hand resting lightly on my back as we entered the ballroom. The room buzzed with energy, but I felt exposed, like everyone could see the truth I'd spent years hiding. Then I met Dr. Lena Carter, a trans woman and Ethan's mentor. She was fierce and warm, with a laugh that filled the room. Ethan's told me about you, she said, her eyes kind but piercing. You're stronger than you know. Riley, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Her words hit me hard. I'd spent so long seeing myself as a secret, a problem to be solved. But Lena saw me as a person, just like Ethan did. As the night went on, I watched Ethan work the room, charming donors and advocating for the program with a passion that made me proud. When he pulled me onto the dance floor, I forgot my fear for a moment, lost in the way his arms felt around me. But the night wasn't all magic. A man in a sharp suit, Dr. Mark Reynolds, Ethan's colleague, cornered me at the bar. His smile was cold, his words sharper. So, you're Ethan's friend, he said, his tone dripping with insinuation. He's taking a risk. You know, people talk. I froze, my old fears roaring back. Ethan found me moments later, his face darkening as he overheard Mark's parting shot. Ignore him, Ethan said, his voice tight. Mark's an ass. He doesn't speak for me or anyone else here. But Mark's words lingered, and so did the whispers I caught from others. Ethan was rising in his career, a star at the hospital. Was I holding him back? That night, as we lay in his bed, I voiced the fear I'd been carrying. What if I'm bad for you? I asked. What if being with me costs you everything? Ethan turned to me, his eyes fierce. You think I care about whispers? Riley, I've spent my life fighting for what's right. You're not a risky the best thing in my life. His words were a balm. But the world kept testing us. A week later, I got a call from my mom. She'd found me through Jake, who'd apparently told her everything. Her voice was shaky, torn between love and confusion. Rachel Riley, I don't understand. She said, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped. I tried to explain, but the call ended in tears, hers and mine. When I told Ethan, he held me as I cried, but I could see the worry in his eyes. My past was catching up, and I didn't know how to outrun it. Then came the letter. It was from my dad, handwritten and mailed to my apartment. He'd written to say he was coming to New York. We need to talk. Rachel, he wrote, using the name that felt like a ghost. I want to understand. Panic gripped me. My dad was a man of few words. His love buried under years of silence. The thought of facing him, of explaining who I was, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Ethan offered to be there, but I knew I had to do this alone. The cafe where I met my dad was quiet, tucked away in Brooklyn with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh bread. He looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, his eyes heavy with something I couldn't name. When he saw me, he stood, his hands fidgeting like he didn't know whether to hug me or shake my hand. We settled on an awkward nod. Riley, he said, testing the name like it was a foreign word. You look different. I braced myself, but his voice wasn't angry, just lost. We talked for hours, haltingly at first. I told him about my life, my art, my truth. He told me about the years since I'd left, how he and Mom had struggled to understand. I wish you'd told us, he said, his voice breaking. We didn't know how to reach you. I wanted to be angry, to blame him for the years of silence. But I saw the pain in his eyes. He was trying, in his own way, to meet me where I was. When he asked about Ethan, I hesitated, then told him the truth. He's my boyfriend, I said, my voice steady. He sees me for who I am. Dad nodded, his expression unreadable. I want to meet him, he said finally, if he's important to you. That night, Ethan and I cooked dinner for my dad in his apartment. It was awkward, tense, but there were moments laughter over a spilled sauce. Ethan's hand on mine that felt like a bridge being built. When Dad left, he hugged me, his grip tight. I'm proud of you, Riley, he said. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. Those words broke something in me, but they also healed. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without fear. Ethan and I grew closer, our love a quiet strength against the world's noise. There were still challenges, whispers at the hospital, my own doubts, but we faced them together. One evening, as we walked through Central Park, Ethan stopped by the Bethesda fountain. The air was crisp, the city glowing around us. He took my hand, his eyes bright with something new. Riley, he said, I want to build a life with you. Not just today, but always. My heart raced. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was hope. Fierce and unshakable. I kissed him, the world fading away, and whispered, always. Our story wasn't perfect. There were still battles to fight, truths to share, wounds to heal. But in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. I'd found love, not just in Ethan, but in myself. And that was a victory worth celebrating.